in the media now that are topical, so I will seek to give my perspective on these issues. But before I do so, I want to once again say how concerned we are about the devastation that we witness across the Caribbean with now Hurricane Maria following closely after Hurricane Irma. And I cannot even imagine how people in those countries now who've been hit by these hurricanes and who may be hit by Maria later in the week, how they're coping with the situation, which is near primitive in many of those countries. No shelter, no food, no water, everything is gone. And so it behoves all of us in Guyana to do whatever we can, if we're a private sector or government or NGO or just ordinary citizens. And we can spare some support for people across the Caribbean who have been devastated by these natural events. I think we should do so. I saw the plea for help from the Prime Minister of Dominica last night, who himself suffered personal tragedy, and he made it clear that almost everything is gone. And I know that there are many Guyanese who live in these islands too, and I want to say that we have a special concern about them. We've seen other countries expeditiously evacuate their citizens and extend help to them. Last week I called for our government to assist with the evacuation of Guyanese who are abroad who desire to be evacuated. At one point in time, I saw the government saying nobody had contacted them. Well, now I think a large number has done so, and they need to act urgently to get our people back home safe, wherever they are. And to also increase the resources available now, or the resources that they have pledged, that is the government, in assisting people. We can do better. Our financial situation, as bad as it is now, would afford us to do much more, spend much more in helping people. And so I urge our government to assist as far as possible. And once again, on behalf of the People's Progressive Party and all of our supporters, we wish to express our deepest concern and regret for what has happened across the Caribbean. The next concern I have is about the sugar workers who have not been paid. And this is an unusual situation. The government is in charge, and it has an obligation to ensure that if people work, they receive their salaries. And no amount of prevarication excuses will absolve them from that responsibility. Now, we've heard in the period immediately after the coalition government took office how better they were managing the sugar industry. But production is all but collapsing across the industry. The morale is low, and the industry is in a state of drift because they're not clear about what the future of the industry will be, because the government itself seems to only be concerned about one thing. The only signal that people get is that there will be closures. How these closures would affect the viability of the industry itself has not been determined or calculated. And so what we face now is an impending catastrophe in the industry, probably an impending collapse of the entire industry unless we're careful because of lack of planning, lack of foresight, mixed signals, and the drift in the government. There is a drift, a policy drift in this government that you cannot have in an industry that is so critical to Guyana's well-being. Not just sugar workers, but Guyana's well-being. This vacuum is unbelievable. Unbelievable that a government will have such a huge vacuum in policies relating to an industry. The third issue that I want to address is the one about that we've seen playing out for the past few months, and that must be causing serious concerns in the minds of individuals as well as institutions. And I'm speaking about the Commission of Inquiry into the plot to assassinate the president. Now, if you recall our position on this matter, you would know that we thought that the appointment of the COI was frivolous. It was under an allegation that the police did not do a good job on some threat that was issued 2 years ago, the life of the president, that nobody found credible. Secondly, our concern related to the timing of the appointment of the COI. The COI was put in place at a time when we had the biggest disaster in Guyana in our entire history in the prison system. We lost the entire prison. Prisoners were roaming the country freely. They were living in pastures. We had daily incidents at the various locations. And in the middle of all of this crisis, the government found the time and energy and resources to put in place the COI. And we said at that time, the only reason that they did that, given it was not urgent, that it was with a sinister motive. It was insidious, and it was going to impact on that there had to be an ulterior motive. Today, we see the motive being revealed. We warned of it, that it had to do with destroying the career path of many of the existing officers there who may be professional and replacing them with people who APNU believe are sympathetic to the PNC. And so we pointed out that that might have been the ulterior motive, and today they have just confirmed. This government has confirmed that that is so. Witness the state-owned Chronicle. Witness the state-owned Chronicle. 3 days in a row, this Commission of Inquiry report was leaked to the Chronicle, leaked in inverted commas, and in spite of crocodile tears being shed by Ramjatan, how he is so concerned about the leak. Imagine a vice president of this country can't tell you how the leak took place, but a leak took place. They could have easily said to Chronicle, don't carry this because it's going to destroy the career of officers. So shake up CID. So the Blenheim and his deputy to be replaced. That's what they want. The next day in Chronicle, Seelal must go, sanction Ramnarain, and then discipline Hickins. We knew that this was going to happen. We knew, and why? Because as Adam Harris in a column questioning my memory this last week, on Sunday, pointed out that Paul Slow had an axe to grind with the PPP government. And Paul Slow is acting on the basis of a vendetta. We believe, if the president was serious about such an investigation, he should have not appointed a Paul Slow to head it, because Paul Slow has bad blood with many people in there. He's an aggrieved party, as Adam Harris himself on Sunday pointed out. As Adam Harris himself on Sunday pointed out. So he was an aggrieved party, and he was a member of the APNU campaign team in the last elections. He was put there to do a hatchet job on the leadership of the police force, destroying professionalism. And I want to know what the British advisor who is there is going to say about this when they talk about professionalism in the police force. And Adam Harris pointed out that Paul Slow was not happy about his transfer under us, so he went to the courts. Imagine going to court because you don't like being transferred. And now I would say to all of the officers who are aggrieved, whose names have been dragged in the mud, deliberately so, that they should go to the courts too and block all of this. Question the COI and its motive. If there is any attempt to use the COI, not a careful report that is done about police reform, but this COI to affect the careers of these officers. This is pure witch hunt at its best. And if we sit quietly and allow this to happen, professionalism in the police force will be destroyed. I wonder where those NGOs are now that used to be so vigilant about professionalism in the police force when this hatchet job is being done on the entire leadership of the police force with a political motive in mind. So that's the third issue. The fourth issue that I want to deal with is the press conference that was held by the AFC after my press conference last week, in which I accused the coalition government of acts or impending acts of corruption. I pointed out at that time that we had knowledge of applications made for blocks of land for EPL licenses offshore, that is exploration and production licenses offshore. And I also accused them of fudging and the feasibility study for the Demerara Harbor Bridge. Now, obviously, it touched a raw nerve in the government. And they hastily put together a press conference at which Patterson, Ramjatan, and Cathy Hughes presided. Now, a lot of things have been said, so let's get a few of the personal things off right away. So Patterson said Jagdeo has an envy that is burning deep inside. Now, what would I be envious of in this coalition government? Their incompetence, underperformance, wanton acts of corruption, the practical uselessness of ministers, lack of vision. Now, Patterson must be high on something to think that I will be envious of this government and its performance in the past, where this is the third year. They have been an abysmal failure in every single department. They have failed on their promises, all the promises that they made to people. They're destroying jobs. They don't have a plan for the future. So this guy must be high on something. Patterson said, Jagdeo is running scared. What am I running scared of? They're in government. He is running scared. Now, I was not even running scared when they threatened to lock us up before the elections. And they keep threatening to lock us up because Jagdeo, as we've been hearing, that Jagdeo stashed billions of dollars abroad. When we suggested that they hire a firm to trace these assets, they don't want to, because we made a suggestion that they should trace the assets of former government officials as well as current ones. They are running scared about that. I'm not running scared. In fact, I've been saying to the president for over a year now, why does he not accede to this? It will cost them less than they're spending on a single trip to hire an international firm specialized in tracing people's assets held abroad. Why they're not doing this? So Patterson must be running scared. And I know why. And I know why. And let me mention a couple of names. Dominican Republic. Let me mention a country's name, Dominican Republic and Cayman Islands. Two countries I will mention that will touch a raw nerve on the part of some of these ministers. So I'm not running scared about anything. In fact, they're running scared that the supporters, APNU supporters that they promised so much to, misled, that they would have a better life, are seeing their welfare now devastated, destroyed, because of callous acts of this government. APNU supporters. And that is why they're running scared too. Because people are not going to be fooled by the racism anymore or the rhetoric. Because now they will ask, at the end of this term, where were all the promises? What did you do for us? Have our lives improved over the last several years? And they will not be able, people like Patterson and the others, Cathy Hughes and the others, will not be able to give answers in the affirmative. Their lives would be improved substantially, and if you know what I mean, substantially. But this is it. So Ramjatan said, I didn't walk around the Maro. And you know, you saw our statement. Now, I'm not in the habit of responding to drunk people, But I'm really serious. The next time I meet the president, I want to urge him to have a policy that you should not have people who are drunk or suffering from a hangover to go to press conferences to represent his government. So Ramjatan is concerned about the Maro business and what gifts I got at my wedding. And at least I walk around a Maro. Ramjatan had it done for him, I think. And since he is talking about family business, maybe he should shut down the family gun licensing, the gun license selling racket that is currently in operation. So that's all I'm going to say about Ramjatan. And he was in the belly of the beast, the PPP, so he knows me, you know, and that I can't be trusted. So this is the same man who has underperformed so badly in this country. You know, it's an embarrassment to me personally that he had an association some time ago with the PPP. Because clearly the incompetence was not that he displays so openly could not have been acquired when he was in the belly of the beast. It must have been acquired recently. And so Ramjatan lied to people openly, the sugar workers, the rice farmers. Today he denies it. And I think it's a memory failure. This is a symptom of when you drink too much. Your memory fails you. So I will not be too harsh on him. I think he genuinely forgets things. So let's talk now about serious business, what they said at the press conference. So, putting aside that, first of all, they said that in relation to my statements that there was corruption afoot, and I called in relation to the handing out of future blocks, and that the president must now institute a system of auction of the future blocks, given that the auction of the blocks that are available. I pointed out that in the period after we found oil, that everything changed. That these blocks that were lying there before, that in many cases people did not even want, suddenly became valuable because Guyana became a country that had discovered oil. So everyone wants to come here now. So suddenly, all those blocks are valuable. And I pointed out that it's only through a competitive system that we will accrue the benefits to the state rather than to individuals. And someone from the media pointed out that even if we give it to private individuals and they sell it at a huge profit, then Guyana will have to turn around and pay for it as part of cost oil, the new price. So that was my position, and I pointed out that corruption was afoot because we are aware that there were applications for licenses. So how did they treat this? I think it is a clever strategy on the part of Patterson not to deal with the substance of what I was saying, which is the corruption part, but to then go and say, Jagdeo gave out all oil blocks. There is nothing left. This is Patterson as reported in the Kaichor news, the fake news by the way, fake news outfit. And this news outfit is in the pocket of the government. In the face of every single explanation to the contrary that their ministers are lying, they will persist with the lies of the government. But I'll come to that in a minute. So this is what Patterson is quoted to say. When we got in office, they had already given out everything. What you got to do is find out who they gave it to. Some of the people we do not even know. There is nothing to give that they have given out all. And he, Jagdeo, should know because he was president. He was the person in charge of natural resources. So several things he said. We gave out everything. Two, that the media should find out who they gave it to, because some of the people are not known, and that Jagdeo was the one who gave these out, everything. So, in relation to the first point, then that's one. But before I go on to respond to it, the next day, Kaichur news again. Government says all oil blocks gone. This is when we responded to the Patterson's lies, and we produced a map which was done by the Geology and Mines Commission of Guyana in February of this year, which showed large numbers of blocks still available, exposing the lie using government's information. All the media houses had it, but Kaichur News says, government says all oil blocks gone. PPP says no, but fails to say what is left. We must say what is left. Although they have it there, they had the map. And I'm going to give the Kaichur News person a copy of this map to go back with and give it to Adam Harris and Glenn Lau. Because there it is. You can see from the map, everyone has a copy of this map, that there are substantial numbers of blocks available here. So that's the first lie that Patterson told. Imagine these people went to a press conference saying, Jagdeo can't be trusted. He is a liar. Don't trust Jagdeo. And then proceeds to lie to the nation that there are no more blocks available when their own government statistics, the government department shows that there are several blocks available. So it is a lie by Patterson, it's incompetence, and it is sinister because now that he says there is nothing available, Jagdeo gave it all out, it means that they can secretly give out all the substantial blocks because then there is nothing, Jagdeo gave it all out. But this minister should be fired for lying, Patterson, or sent for rehabilitation, sent back to primary school for not doing the research. And I gather he's the new spokesperson on oil and gas. God helps us if Patterson is the spokesperson for oil and gas now. So we have established one thing today, that what Patterson said at that press conference is a lie, and no amount of obfuscation, no amount of the Kaichur News lies that they keep peddling and the fake news can change that fact, that that there are blocks available. Jagdeo did not give out any of the blocks. Jagdeo did not give out all. Now, I went to the next thing because they personalize everything about Jagdeo. So the blocks were given out in the PPP period, for which we are extremely proud, blocks that were given out. But I looked at the blocks, and there are 10 blocks So he said nobody knows who they're giving out to. So there are 10 blocks here currently available: Mid-Atlantic, Tolo Echo, CGX, Repsol, Ratio, Andarco, Exxon, On Energy, Nabi, and CGX 2013. 10 blocks that are currently out. Well, 10 licenses that are out. And you can know exactly the people who they are. So he said, we don't know who they are. Some of them are unknown. But they can easily ask the GGMC who they are. They're 10. So that's another lie. To create this shroud of secrecy that somehow the PPP gave people that the country is not aware of, or somebody who we don't know who they are. That's another lie. So I checked when the dates when they were given out. And almost none of these 10 blocks were given out in the period Jagdeo was president. None of them. Although I'm extremely proud, I can give you the dates. The 10 licenses, I keep saying blocks, the 10 licenses that were issued were done in the period when Janet Jagan was there, or in the post-2013 period. And so I did participate in renewing original licenses, etc. But the original license was not given out. So, but I don't have a problem with that, because we are proud of the history of the PPP. It's because we pushed that ExxonMobil found oil today. We're proud of our history, but they personalize it to say Jagdeo gave out all these blocks. When, if you check when they were given out, you would see it's not true. You remember they also said, personalizing again another lie, that Jagdeo had amended the licenses, the law to prevent disclosure of the agreement. Another three ministers, in fact, they were common ones, said this about Jagdeo again. That time, the other time, it was Gaskin who said that I amended the law in 2008, a lie. Ramjatan said I amended it in 2011, a lie. And Trotman said I amended it in 1997, another lie. Never amended. Imagine within the past month, they've lied twice about things because it's all a plan to demonize me. To say that Jagdeo amended the law, now Jagdeo gave out everything. So, there are two sets of lies. And you want to bet that Kaichor News will never point this out, because next week they are going to carry another set of lies. You will see them repeating the lies of the government again. In the face of all of this evidence, just like when Trotman said that in Parliament, that we had given out the entire forest by the time they got into office. And we pointed out that it was a lie based on the Forestry Commission own stats. You will see that a substantial amount of our forests is unallocated. A substantial amount is unallocated. And secondly, of those who receive timber sales agreement, that more than half of the timber sales agreement were given out in the pre-1992 era by Mr. Hoyt and the others, Red Barama and DTL and CLECO and all of these. So again, this week Kaichor News repeated the same lie, that Jagdeo gave out those two, everything in the forestry sector. So they have nothing now. When will these lies stop? And this fake news, why do people buy the Kaichor News? Because it's just to get a set of fake news. Tons and tons of fake news from the Kaichor. And they invent things and let the government off the hook. So we have established clearly now that Patterson is a liar, is the liar, and we have done so conclusively across this country, not Jagdeo, but Patterson, and that the three ministers who went there and got personal about Jagdeo, and Jagdeo can't be trusted, they should do the decent thing, maybe, and even resign. But of course, we're not going to get them to do that. They lied to the entire country about it. So that was, I remember I said, I put aside the name calling first. Then I dealt with the substance on the oil and gas allegations. The next one was, that I mentioned, was about the bridge. And you would recall that I said at that time that I did not have the pre-feasibility study that we did, because the ministry had taken it down from their website. So Patterson went to the press conference again and said, in the Kaichur News, the hypocrisy, look at it, PPP administration supported location for new Demerara Bridge, Patterson. And he goes on to say things like, the minister said that some of Jagdeo comments can be deemed as downright lies. He also said that the former president's latest remarks about the Demerara Harbor Bridge is one such case. And he quoted from the pre-feasibility study. The pre-feasibility study has shown that a high-level 4-lane fixed bridge at Houston-Versailles is the only economical feasibility alternative. That is what he's been saying. He then goes on to the next page to talk about non-disclosure. And he pointed out here that a cabinet paper, he showed the media a cabinet paper requesting $103 million from the cabinet in the PPP era. That money was allocated to do the pre-feasibility study, implied the $103 million. He then further said that we are such hypocrites that we went out to tender for the bridge and that the tender failed. That we had chosen this location, the Versailles location. We got $103 million from the Treasury to do the studies. And thirdly, we had gone to tender for the Versailles location, and the tender failed. Now, what's their facts? So, they have, this is their pre-feasibility study. Now, if you go through the pre-feasibility study, you will see, first of all, let's see the cost of the pre-feasibility study. So this is the feasibility study that they concluded. This was the pre-feasibility study. The cost of this study, pre-feasibility study, was not $103 million as he implied. It was under 30,000 US dollars. In fact, about 5.6 million Guyana dollars. That was the cost of the pre-feasibility study. This one, the feasibility study, rightfully so, cost $153 million. So the implication that $103 million was spent on a feasibility or a pre-feasibility study is false. Secondly, it shows Patterson's almost infantile understanding of what a pre-feasibility study is. A pre-feasibility study is just pulling together facts. That's why you will pay less than $30,000 for it, and the other one nearly $1 million US dollars. It pulls together some facts, and it examines these facts and would give a preliminary outlook on the basis of existing facts. It doesn't do numbers. It doesn't calculate in great detail like the rate of return on an investment, etc. Because that's not the purpose of a pre-feasibility study. So this pre-feasibility study that was done, guess what it compared? It compared a 4-lane fixed structure at Versailles that is a high bridge, 4 lanes with no opening, compared with a 4-lane high bridge at Hope, fixed structure, and a floating, 2 options for floating bridges at Demerara Harbor Bridge. So in a you can't compare like oranges with apples. That's the first thing the pre-feasibility study did. Secondly, so on that basis, when this was submitted to the government did not, although it says on the basis of the numbers, existing numbers, it seemed as though this location for this type of bridge is the most economically feasible. It's not a feasibility study. So guess what the government went out to tender for? This is the ad, and I will share it with Kaichor because it was advertised in the Kaichor. The government in 2013 tested the market. Patterson needs to understand something about market testing. If it had made a taken a definitive position on the Versailles location, as the pre-feasibility study says, it would not have issued an expression of interest request in the latter part of 2013. And here is what the expression of interest is. The project framework for the new bridge is based on the following. The project will be implemented using a boot model in a manner similar to the Berbice Bridge. 3 possible sites have been proposed in the pre-feasibility study for the new bridge. 1, a location close to the existing floating bridge. 2, Houston East Bank to Versailles, West Demerara. 3, New Hope, East Bank, Demerara to Catarina, West Bank, Demerara. Any form of fixed crossing will be considered. A pre-feasibility study D for the construction of the bridge has been completed and can be accessed from the Ministry of Public Works website. Now, how would you go out to tender for 3 locations if you had chosen Versailles? And this was after the pre-feasibility study. This was called market testing. This is the fallacy. If these guys are serious about the bridge, then they would study the history, how these things evolve. But it's like losing. I don't want to go into any more details because it's more complex about the stream of benefits and the stream of costs over which we have huge concerns. And all of these determine the feasibility of the bridge. But our questions were simply this, and we go back to the questions which Patterson is yet to answer. 1 is what will be the increase in tolls? 2, what will be the subsidy? So the government study, on page 55 of the government study itself, it shows various options for the tolls and for subsidies. On page 55 of their study, it says at 100% increase in the toll, the government contribution will be $140.1 million US over the first 12 years alone. The subsidy for the bridge, including when the toll is increased by 100%, will cost 3 times the Berbice Bridge, the subsidy alone. If they increase it by 100%, it goes on. It says toll for river vessels be increased to 700% of the present rates. This is all we are asking that the country be told. What you're leaving for it in the future. What kind of debt? you're leaving our subsidy on the Treasury. We pointed out the example of Suriname, where they built 2 bridges, fixed structure high bridges, and did it on the recurrent, on recurrent expenditure. And it caused the exchange rate to practically collapse. It was unsustainable. Countries like ours have to study these things carefully. So all we were saying, tell us what the toll level increase will be, how much subsidy you will give, what guarantee you will have to give on debts raised for the bridge, because if people default on those debts, then they will have to be taken by government. Then what structure are you going to use, boot or a government finance structure? If it's government finance, where is the money coming from? A loan, a grant, or revenue? Which one? You need to tell us that long before you make a decision on these matters. And how did the bridge end up on Stanley Ming's land? Until now, imagine Patterson said, I'm aware I met with all of the people from whom we're acquiring land. And he doesn't know about that one. On the Versailles side, he only did it on the Houston side. So the bridge will end up in the sea. It wouldn't land there anymore. But it was all lies. I don't want to get into too many complex issues on the feasibility study, because let me tell you something. I've seen the cake shop-like operation that they're approaching this bridge on in the fashion, which is not alien to this government. Almost everything they blunder through. And then they blame the PPP for it. So I lied on this. I lied when I said we did not take a decision on the final, the Versailles-Houston alignment. Because if we had taken a decision, we would not have gone out for 3 locations after the pre-feasibility study was done. It's a lie. Total lie. Absolute lie. So Patterson is lying again. Second lie. In spite of all that they would say on the Kaichor News. Total lie. And it is, I've heard from someone, one of our members of parliament, in fact, Gail Teixeira, gave me some information that might even be more troublesome. Just last night she sent it to me, and I've not had a chance to verify it as yet. But I think she would do more work on this. That the request for the feasibility study, that they had 22 companies that tendered, and that this company that got it was not one of the 22. And there is no evidence that the tender was annulled. But she is verifying it now, but that's a different matter for another day. So we will deal with that, but we have established on substance that you had 3 ministers, outside of the things they said about Jagdeo and Jagdeo's marriage and everything, and how Jagdeo is a bad man. In fact, Ramjatan wanted me to retire to a farm after my presidency. I think that's the source of their concern, that Jagdeo should have just retired, gone away. Shouldn't be in politics anymore. That's their big concern. So I'm not dealing with that. That's petty thing for these small-minded individuals. There are 2 substantive issues there that were dealt with at the press conference. And on both, the ministers lied. The ministers lied. Now I have seen another thing about the last time I was here. I was asked about the NIS and the Barbies Bridge. I think you did. And I spoke about it. And then Adam Harris on Prime News, Adam Harris is the editor of Kaichor News. So Adam Harris, the Prime News is the fake news equivalent of the Kite News. That's the print one, and one is electronic. So the common thing is Adam Harris. So he says, is Jagdeo's memory failing? Imagine Jagdeo's memory failing. So he says that one, and before that, the Prime News said that Ramroop did collect dividends when last paid. This is what it says. And then the objection to lowering of the toll is because he demanded higher dividends. So he said Ramroop collected dividends, and the objection of the bridge to lowering the tolls was because Ramroop wanted higher dividends. So that's one. And then he said, he went on to talk about questioning NIS investments over the years, and that suddenly I said it's private money, when I used to say in the past it's public money, which is a lie. So let us go back through these issues again. And maybe I'll come to it. So is NIS money public or private? Now the NIS has its own act. The NIS collects money from state employees as well as private employees. So it's not government owned. The NIS has an obligation to invest those resources in a manner that would give it a return that would allow it to meet the long-term viability of the fund, the pension fund, and its benefits that it pays out. So their investment committee make decisions about where to invest these resources. They made a decision to invest in CLECO. Like many other people, including Adam Harris, he invested there, and why he invested is because the return was great. Adam Harris and many PNC bigwigs had nearly lost their money, but we had to pay them, give them back their money at face value. So they made an investment there, and they had issues with it. They made an investment in the Berbice Bridge, and why? Because the Berbice Bridge has the potential of giving them a greater return than the Treasury bills was giving them. In fact, 4 or 5 times more than they were getting from Treasury bills. So these are investment decisions that the NIS makes, and they always look for return. So has the NIS benefited from the Berbice Bridge? What did they invest in? So NIS invested in the Berbice Bridge. So it had, remember I went through the last time about the structures. I spoke about bond number 1, bond number 2, subordinate debt number 3, preference shares, and common shares. This was the structure for the investment, the vehicle through which different people invested. So NIS invested in these structures. Bond number 1, bond number 2, subordinate debt. They acquired some preference shares, and they have a small part of the common shares. At this point, at 2015, when we left office, NIS was receiving payments on its investments in bond number 1, bond number 2, the subordinate debt, and had received payment for 1 year on the preference debt. The only share, the place where they have not received any return, is on the common shares, which is where Bobby Rambo has most of the investment. And so it's not true. So that's one. So NIS has received investments, their returns. Now Adam Harris said he called the NIS, and it's not so. They laughed. They laughed. They didn't say anything. But he could check it, that they received a rate of return on their investment in the Berbice Bridge on bond number 1, bond number 2, and on the subordinate debt, and 1 year at least on the preference debt. Now, the bridge never declared a dividend. So how could the Prime News say that the dividends, this guy collected dividends and wanted higher dividends? That's why he opposed the reduction of the toll. They never declared dividends, and it's another lie. And it's easy to check. And I doubt, guess how he verifies it? Adam Harris said, managers, nothing could further be from the truth, right? I ended up trying to get from the current chairman and from the general managers, past and present, how much money the NIS has been receiving. To a man or woman, they looked with a smile, they said, we don't want to talk about that because you know the answer as well as we do. This is his evidence that I'm lying. This is Adam Harris. They smile at each other and said, we don't want to talk about it. But he knows that it is a lie. This is what passes off for fake news. I'm telling you here in detail what the NIS, I didn't do so the last time because a lot of these things are ages ago. And I got Adam Harris. My memory is good enough. It's not short term like Kaichor to remember a lot of these things. You have ministers and the president who don't remember what happened yesterday in this government. Yesterday, they keep forgetting. But the thing is that it's not true that there was no dividends paid as Prime News said. It's a lie because dividends were not declared. Never declared. Dividends can only come from profits. So this is a whole set of lies. So in the same article in Kaichor News, is Jagdeo's memory failing? The Jagdeo government that conducted a feasibility study that concluded that the best location for the new bridge would be Versailles and Houston. So Kaichor News lie again. Jagdeo government, this pre-feasibility study was conducted in 2013. Jagdeo was long gone. So two lies in this one paragraph. That Jagdeo government did it. It was done in 2013. And that a feasibility study was conducted. There was a pre-feasibility study, but he elevated it to a feasibility study. Two lies in one paragraph. So that the scheme put millions of dollars in the Berbice River crossing. This is the NIS. But it was like a grant because there were no returns. Lie again. Lie. And then he spoke about, wrote a memorandum to the cabinet asking for money for the same Versailles-Houston crossing. That we wrote the cabinet in 2013 asking money for the Houston crossing. It is another lie. One article packed with about 5 lies, and he questions my memories. This is Kaichor News, a fake news outfit. I can point, in the last week, they've told about 10 lies. 10 lies, they hobnob with the government, socialize with the government ministers and everybody, and then come back, and it's almost like a justification for all of the lies that the government is doing. They do it on a routine basis. So we have established now, by now, that On the NIS issue, they lied about it. We've established on the bridge that they are lying about it. They have lots to hide. And we've established on the oil and gas sector that they are hiding from the truth again. These are the things. So when you have a press conference of this nature from the government, that's all you can express. I've seen they have their supporters all with the thing about Jagdeo again. I've seen today's paper, they put like, Jagdeo is now Lee Kuan Yew or something like that. They have another one of their targeting me again. Now, I never said I'm Lee Kuan Yew. I never made any claim. In fact, I couldn't be. But let me tell you one thing, that I'm clear where Guyana was going, and I was clear where Guyana was going in the past. And I can here, now, at this time, tell you sector by sector, any sector you ask me, and I can tell you what our plans were for the next 10 years. I can do so extensively too, without having to go back and find out. I can do that now. That is what I know, because we worked on it. And when we were talking about the sectors of the future to create wealth of the future, when we were looking to transform Guyana from wealth in the environmental sector and from oil and gas and from locational advantages and a whole range of other things, plantation, agriculture, without damaging our fragile ecosystem. Those were the things we were talking about to reposition Guyana. And I can go through them in great detail. We were aiming for lofty goals that would make this country wealthier and its citizens better off. We've gone back to a vision now. The question, we didn't have a vision about Lee Kuan Yew. This president has a vision about guava cheese and plantain chips and all of that. Why don't they question this vision, where the vision is? You know, going to talk today to Exxon about bringing gas to do electricity when no feasibility study has been done comparing the alternatives, and not a fossil fuel venture, but comparing hydro versus gas-fired power plant versus bunker seed-fired power plants, because you can't do solar and wind as base load. No comparisons. In the long run, hydro is the most reliable. But this is it, and creating the impression. So suddenly, ExxonMobil is asked to bring the gas to fund the power plant here on shore. But we don't know if it's feasible, or would this alter the agreement? All of these things are, it's just going after headlines that mean very little. Very little. And so, I saw the article today, and I don't want to get into it, but because it triggered me a little bit about talking about ERP. The ERP was a stabilization plan. We had become bankrupt. Greenidge had said himself, the debt was 153% of revenue to service debt. We had a fiscal deficit that was 25% of GDP. A balance of payment deficit that was 47% of GDP. Interest rates, 35, 36%. How it took Guyana to the IMF as a stabilization, just to get money to sustain the country. It was not a growth strategy. We had to work our way through that to a growth strategy. And today, I would say the People's Progressive Party has a clear growth strategy in the future, and it doesn't all rely on oil and gas. A growth strategy that would ensure that we do not suffer the vicissitudes of the market or negatively impact from volatility. So let me come back to the original things that I spoke about last week. What locally incorporated groups. And then do your research yourself to find out which are the locally incorporated groups and the membership. And it could lead you, I should not be telling you this, this is investigative journalism, you should be doing some of these things. So that's my position. Please don't let them, I saw the press conference and some of the reporters are throwing softball at these the Patterson and the others, these ministers.
Mr. Jagdeo,
Yes. Yeah.
is it not true that the chairman of the board of NIS was an operative of the PPP at the time that the NIS money was given out to build the bridge? Who was the chairman of the board of NIS at the time that the money was allotted to the investment was given?
That's your question? So yeah, go on. Is that your question?
The reason I'm asking that question, first thing was the answer to that.
No, go on. Ask all your questions.
Because the notion is that NIS invested in the bridge because they saw benefits. But we had a situation where somebody was fired from NBS for not investing in the bridge.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. And I'm glad that you yourself shifted from giving out, the money was given out, to invested in the bridge. That's right. Dr. Roger Luncheon was there as the chairman of the NIS when the NIS invested in the Berbice Bridge, for which the NIS has received returns on the bond, the bond 1, bond 2, the subordinate debt, and 1 year of the preference shares. They have received a return higher than what they would have gotten had they invested in treasury bills. So I think it was a good decision. So Luncheon was there, and I'm very proud of Luncheon. The next thing about NBS, NBS is totally different. So if the Berbice, that's what I'm saying, NBS is obfuscation. I don't know if the matter is before the court or it's been concluded. I don't want to go into details on NBS. But as far as I am concerned, as far as I've seen, the two had nothing to do with the firing. I think the firing, from what I've read, had to do with allegations of improper action on the part of several people at NIS, not NIS, NBS, concerning the company's affairs. I think it's a political red herring to link it to the bridge now, to say they were fired because of the bridge, not investing in the bridge. So then people start thinking, oh, it's a political thing that caused the people to be fired, not improper action. So are you sure? Did you explore in great detail the improper action that the board said that they fired these individuals for? Could it not be just a red herring? That is why an excuse to divert attention from the real reason for the firing. I don't know, because I don't want to get embroiled in that. And many representations were made to me by that same group of people. And I asked the board to examine it, because from a distance, about these issues. None of it came up because of the NIS when I was president. So I don't want to get involved in those details. Completely different thing. Completely different thing. Now, if it was bad to invest in the Berbice Bridge, with those numbers, how much worse will it be in investing in a bridge now that requires $140 million US in subsidies in 12 years, if they have to, if that is after they've increased the toll by 100%. It will be much worse. And now somebody needs to say, because I saw a letter from some engineers. Now, maybe I'm digressing a bit here, but I want to tell you, that one of the reasons, critical reasons, when we had the study on the Berbice River, and the 6 locations were studied, and the report is available. that one of the reasons we did not build we couldn't afford a high-level bridge at that time. The reason we didn't build a flat structure or a medium-scale structure is because we did not know how the upriver activities would evolve, how much bauxite, etc. So if you cut off the river like that too early by fixing a structure, part of the river is fixed, the bridge is fixed, or the part of the bridge over the river is fixed, then it could harm future development upstream. Now, this government has moved away from the original feasibility study to the pre-feasibility study. That recommended fixed structure, and it studied a floating, a fixed. This is a medium-level bridge. That was a high-level, medium-level bridge with an opening, still the opening. So I saw that now, where I saw some questions raised about what will happen upriver at Linden. So when we build a road to Brazil, which will become a major feature in the future, if not now, in the future, and probably take it to the Deepwater Harbor in Berbice, Linden will become an intermediary port because not all the traffic will go. Maybe for the Deepwater Harbor, the traffic will go to Berbice. But you will need for the lighter vessels, because not deep draft vessels can go up to Linden. You'd have a number of vessels having to go up there because that will become an intermediary port at Linden. Did this bridge, the type of bridge, take into consideration future developments upriver? All of those matters have to be debated. So it is critical that we look at these issues.
Fair enough, Mr.
Yes, right.
Mr. Jagdeo, I heard you mentioned BVI and the Cayman Islands synonymous with Mr. Patterson. Is he something else?
No, you didn't miss anything. You heard me clearly about, I don't know whether it was synonymous with or with the government officials. I was mentioning it about the unwillingness of this government to hire an international firm to trace the assets of former government officials or current ones, and current ones, not or, and current ones. When we have called for it, after they make allegations all the time that we took a lot of money and stashed it abroad. And we have all these assets abroad. So why would they want to do it? Then they can easily prove this. I think they don't want us to get, you'll be surprised the findings. You'll be surprised at the findings.
Mr. Jagdeo.
No, Kaichor News, the fake news now. Yeah.
I'm sorry, just so that I wouldn't lie and fake news.
All right.
Just to be clear, you're saying that you're not willing to say who are the AFC officials that are going off after our docs.
Listen, I've just pointed out that we have a minister of the government who lied, in spite of all the excuses, who lied about the availability of the blocks. Is that not big enough news for this country? Who lied and accused me of lying. So the story can't be about Jagdeo now refusing to submit info about who stealing. That is clever. That is where Kaichor News wants to take it. So Jagdeo suddenly didn't give some information about who is corrupt. It's your job. Kaichor News used to accuse us of corruption on every single thing without any evidence whatsoever. They continue to do so without any evidence. You go and ask Patterson about it. Ask them about all these contracts that they're giving out. Why they're annulling the tenders, why they're not going out to tenders, why they gave out a $605 million to Ansamaka, why they gave one of their supporters a $65,000 US per month contract to rent a bottom house. Why are you asking them that? That's where the issue should be. Don't ask me about when there is ample evidence of corruption, you don't go after that, and you're asking me now to say who is corrupt in this government. If you ask me, almost all of them are on the hustle.
Okay, can I
Yes, yes, go on. But don't make it about me and not giving information.
Okay, all right. You've been able to prove numerous capacities lies, but just one other thing I want to find out from you. He also made an allegation that you wanted the bridge to land by Dr. Randall, and he made an allegation that both of the banks on both sides, the plots of land there are owned by your friends and friends of the party. Are those lies as well?
Well, I don't know. Ramroop bought the television station from Vera and his assets, so I didn't know if he bought the land with the hope of the bridge. But again, that is called switching. It did not land. If that was the case, in 2013, the PPP would have advertised for a bridge at that location. The fact is they advertised for a bridge or expressions of interest at 3 locations. 3 locations. So it can be substantiated by fact. So can't explain how, in fact he can explain, but he would not explain how the bridge ended up on Stanley Ming's land. So did he benefit from it personally? So suddenly we wanted it to land on somebody else's property, Ramu, who had acquired a television station because, and his property, because he knew the bridge would land here. You know, this is the kind of far-fetched thing that is going on. So this is again Kaichor news spinning. Kaichor news spinning. This is the problem with it. They can't get to answer the critical question. So suddenly he makes another allegation. He is in charge now. Look at our track record. We went out to tender and that location was not chosen. That was not the chosen location by the PPP. We went out to testing the market. We tested it at 3 sites. Because can't that get into your head? Yeah. So, but he seems to have made this only personally to you. The allegation, did he make this personally to you or to whom? Oh, at the press conference? Oh, I didn't realize that he made that at the press conference too. Okay, well, yes. All right, let me go. Marcel.
Would you please see that there's an expression of interest by the rice line and the farm for the purchase of the skeleton estate? Would you support that purchase? And on the GCOM issue, there still hasn't been a response by President. I wanted to know if simultaneously you're making any preparations for the discussions that I think was discussed. Should there not be a person chosen from the service? I think it's that there was a proposal that there be a hierarchy discussed.
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to know if any mechanisms.
So right now, we're waiting for word from the president in relation to the list. I believe, as I said before, that there are people on the list who have all the requisite qualifications to serve. The president said he will act in accordance with the Chief Justice's ruling, and that's what Harman said. And so I'm sure he could find one of the 6 who will be suitable, because prior to that he had a view that he had to find all 6 acceptable before he started considering the list. So right now I'm waiting on word from him. What we do in the future will depend on the answer we get. So that's in relation to that matter. On the on the privatization of the Skeldon factory that the government has been talking about. This is not like if Guyana, at some point in time, we have to write up the economic history of Guyana, because people don't know and how difficult it was in the early days. There was a time when we had 5 entities in the pre-1992 era doing privatization. 5 entities: Public Corporation, Secretariat, the State Planning, Ministry of the unit in the Office of the President, the public, different places. And it was, the assets were shared out to them and then privatized. So take, for example, GT&T was sold with no valuation of the assets. Done. So when we got into office, we stopped all privatization. And if you have time to read, you will see that we went to the Parliament with a white paper called the Privatization Policy Framework Paper, in which we outline the institutions, the technical and political institutions, like the unit, the board, cabinet, and bring in outside participants in the privatization process. So at the board, you'll have the Private Sector Commission, the Labor Movement, and the Consumer Affairs sitting with ministers before it's recommended to the cabinet. And we have followed that on every privatization, and we've issued 2 public documents to show all the privatization. And many of the things that people ask for now, say we didn't release, if you just go to those public documents, you will find them, including everything, the Sanata complex, all of those. So that is how it was done. So I expect, first of all, if the government is going to privatize anything, that you have to do a valuation of the assets long before you start thinking about privatizing. So only when you value the assets, like I saw somebody said it's $1 billion, something recently $1 billion US dollars, but what's the value of the land, the factory? What's the value of the cogen plant that Clive Thomas himself said supplies 90,000 households in Berbice? What's the value of that cogeneration plant? Will it be part of the privatization, etc.? We don't support it, but I'm just telling you any of this. But I'm telling you about an approach to it. So just taking expressions of interest from anyone without the valuation of the assets done, and a decision taken about what will be retained in government and what will not be retained, and how we can ensure future viability. It's nonsense. It's not serious. And so that's why I pay very little regard to these proposals. However, this government is notorious for these discussing with people. So we saw a letter from the head of the Presidential Secretariat to Mr. Wesley Curtin, giving him the powers in November 2016, giving him powers to negotiate the sale of Gaisuko in whole or in part. In whole or in part. This is what we hear. So we could very well wake up one morning and find out that it's gone, because you don't hear has anyone asked Harmon, why did you issue this letter to sell Gaisuko in whole or in part when you're talking about only closing down a part of it and privatizing a part? Nobody questions them. They get away with murder, and then they get kite-short to fake it and make it look like the PPP is to be blamed for that letter too. Next week you'll hear the PPP issue that caused Harmon so much grief that he had to issue this letter to Curtin. That is why, they'll get them to say that. So it can't be serious. No approach of this nature can be serious to an industry. And that's why I took you back to what we did, and you can see scrupulously we followed the rules on these matters. And that is how we brought greater transparency to it. By the way, even on contracts, I know a lot of times you ask me about what the PPP, if it is not duplicitous of us to argue for them to release contracts and we did not. And so you may have a valid point there, but they campaign. Remember, they campaign on this transparency issue. But I just want to ask you, some of the members of the media, that how many of you have read the Access to Information Act of 2011? This act that I passed as president. It has my signature here. This one I signed, not the oil contracts. This one I signed. If you look at this act, those contracts are not protected. There is a special category of documents that are protected, like national security, etc., but also they have time frame when they can be made public, after some period. But have any of you in the media tested this act? Where you make the request, because you're required to make a request in writing to get contracts. Have you read it? The members of the media, have you sought to use the tools? In fact, here, so you can get from the Jagdeo era a lot of the things, the contracts there, because they are not protected, because Jagdeo left and the act passed this one. I hope Kaicho News will put that too, that would allow the people to get it. And it is quite comprehensive. It says right to have access to information in Part 4. Notwithstanding any law to the contrary and subject to the provisions of this act, it shall be the right of every Guyanese citizen or person domiciled in Guyana to obtain access to an official document. Please don't, so this is the tool that allows people to access information from now, in the future, as well as past information. So I don't hear people talking about this. They keep saying, oh, you didn't release it, but was a request made, ever made? And please, read this. I just want this one, Marcel, before you go on. Please look at it and make sure that you read it. Very few countries have this sort of making access to an official document a right of citizens by law. You're impressed with it? Okay, all right, okay.
Coming back to NAFTA, you didn't directly say yes or no. I wanted to know if it was safe to say then that you can't support
Any.
bid or tender unless the financial due diligence process has
And yes, and the government is clear. It says, here are the things we've done. We've done the studies. How will they assess any proposal? How will they assess any proposal unless they know whether it's good or bad if you don't have an idea of the value of what you're disposing of?
And my other question has to do with the same Cayman Islands and statement.
I just said call two countries.
Yeah, but when you call,
I called the names of two countries.
there is an association of
Well,
hidden assets or offshore assets, and it's a serious nexus to make ministers down in the Republic of Cayman Islands.
No.
Nobody's thinking vacation.
You heard what I said. I was speaking in terms of our call for the president to hire a firm to track assets of former government officials as well as current ones. And then I called out the names of two countries. So I hope that when they do if they were to do this, that the officials will look at these two countries to see if anybody, from past or present, have accounts there.
Mr. I'm going to follow up today, guys.
So I was quite clear.
Mr. Just quickly, a large percentage of your
Yes,
of the PP supporters are involved with sugar. And sugar was having problems under the PP administration. Does the PPP administration have a plan for sugar that they could, in the interest of national patriotism, that they can offer to this government to reduce the impact that you are that you think?
Sure. Now, we said, first of all, good faith negotiations, discussions. This government, we said, if you're tackling an industry of this nature, first of all, you have to do it on the basis of numbers. So let's look at a study, okay, of the state of the industry, feasibility study. Secondly, social impact, and then we look at diversification. 3 studies we are urging the government to do. So on the basis of these studies, we can craft a medium-term strategy for sugar. Sugar would require help in the medium term. I think it can get to good profitability in the outer years of the medium term. But we need to support it now. And you need to support it not just because if you look at the cost of closure versus the cost of, and I'm looking at cost to the country of closure versus the cost of the subsidy, you will find that the cost of closure to the country is greater than the subsidy. Because, and we believe that, it has implications for taxes, linkages in the community, for foreign currency earning, a whole range of things, for gross domestic product, exchange rate stability, etc. NIS payments, all of these things. So that's what we're saying, a fact-based approach. This government, in a perfunctory way, has been making public statements like Gaisuco has $80-something billion of debt. Right? This is one of the big things. When you look at the debt, half of that debt is future pension liabilities. It is not like debt to a creditor now at this point in time. Secondly, a substantial part of the debt is long-term debt. You don't have to pay it now. Thirdly, a big part of that debt is to the GRA, etc. Now we're writing off billions for private companies like DDL and the others. Why can't we do that for Gaisuco? And then you have the creditors' debt, the short-term debt, which are more of a problem, but a fraction of the 84 billion. So when you hear that, suddenly people say, oh, put it away. And that is what it is more of a campaign to show, oh, look, the PPP rack up all these debts. There's no way forward. Now, look at the discussions we were invited to. 30th of December, we got a call, I think, on the 30th of December to go to a meeting on the 31st. Then we got another one in February, like 2 days before, to go to the next meeting. And then the third meeting, the day before, we got the call again and told, we're done with you. But before they came to so-called listening to us, listen about our way forward, when we present some options, or we urge these studies be done that will form a basis for the discussion, they had already given that letter to sell off the place to Curtin. No good faith negotiations. Now, it's not only PPP supporters. This is a fallacy. It's good for all of Guyana. When Rose Hall is closed, it would affect New Amsterdam. But almost 20% of the sugar industry are Afro-Guyanese too. You go to Tuckberg and East Bank, Berbice and all these places, and you find out how many workers would lose their job. You just go to Wales. It has nothing to do with PPP or PNC. This is about Guyanese. and what is good for the future. And I think we can transition out of sugar maybe in the long run. As if the economy picks up and you get oil and gas proceeds and you have new industries forming like we were talking about the future, eventually as the jobs grow in these sectors, you transition out. But look at the net deficit. So on sugar alone, 10,000 losing their jobs, but we're getting 500 on oil and gas. That's a deficit now in the short, medium term. Countries are not managed that way. You have to have smooth transitions out of sectors. So we are willing to have that discussion, but there is no basis at this point in time. Thank you very much.